Welcome to What's Important to You, a podcast about purpose, passion, and the things that truly matter. I'm James Dean, life coach and host, and each week I sit down with inspiring guests from all walks of life and ask one powerful question: what's important to you? Their stories will spark reflection, fuel your goals, and remind you what really matters, so you can move forward with clarity and momentum. In today's episode, I'm joined by someone who brings insight, energy, and humanity to everything she does. She is a keynote speaker, behavioural profiler, and the founder of the People Reader Ltd. She's developed powerful tools to help individuals and teams understand themselves and others more deeply and communicate more effectively. Her life took a powerful turn after surviving the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, where she witnessed the best of what people can bring to each other in times of crisis. That experience reshaped her mission to unleash human potential and celebrate the value we each bring, especially the things we often overlook in ourselves. Today we talk about fairness, neurodiversity, communication, and the surprising strengths we carry without even realizing. Today we find out what's important to Michelle Mills Porter. Hi Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. How are you?
I'm great. Really looking forward to this chat. So we're going to dive straight in, Michelle, with the first question, which is, what's important to you?
I think fairness is one of the things that is most important to me. Very much so.
Fantastic. And where did that, is that something that came about, or has always been something that's...
It's always been there. I think it's become more prevalent over the years. And I think with my experience and what happened to me and my kind of revelation, which changed the trajectory of my life, I think that became even more evident, the need to have a little bit of equilibrium, to accept people for what they bring to the party. That suddenly became so much more important. And it's strange, actually, James, because it was only, 4 years ago when I was diagnosed as ADHD. And it just so happens that fairness is a really big thing for a lot of people with neurodivergence. So I think it's kind of inbuilt.
Interesting. That's really interesting, because it's definitely one of those, that word for me really does resonate as well. And stubbornly so, the way I would for myself, I'm just getting sort of goosebumps just thinking of it in that way. So it's very interesting you say that. And the link between neurodivergency, because there's been this is going off topic, but I love the fact that we do, because it's been, I don't know if recently there's been a few documentaries. I know I haven't watched the one that Jamie did last night on dyslexia. Jamie Oliver, he just put one out last night, and then Chris Packham in the BBC's been doing a few he did one about ADHD and dyslexia and stuff like that, and it's especially for people in adult life who were never diagnosed or given that sort of opportunity diagnosis as children, and it's almost the reflective perspective that maybe, that's why, or that's the reasons for. So was that almost the getting that diagnosis? How did you take that? Was it relief? How did you, when you kind of got that?
It was massive relief. So yeah. Just to put things into context, I was entered for 8 O-levels at school. I was top sets, all the rest of it, did really well. And then in my O-levels, that's how old I am, you only get one chance. You don't have coursework taken into account or anything. And I failed. I walked away with 2 O-levels, and the only 2 O-levels that I got were the ones that didn't need any recall. So I wasn't allowed to even go on to further education. I was deemed not intelligent enough. It was lucky that I was joining the forces at 17 anyway, but my whole life I've been kind of treated like I'm unintelligent, and I knew that wasn't the case. Now, what I did with it is I've always fought against it. Some people, can say that they're affected by it, that they were victims or whatever, but I always fought against it. It's like, I'll show you. And that was my attitude. But actually, it was after I'd become a behaviour profiler, and then I became what I call an expert in human behaviour. And what that means is that I was actually designing my own analyses. And it was my own behaviour analysis that I wrote that kind of went, Aruga, Aruga. So it was, I saw the patterns and I thought, and then because I deal with so many young people and so many young adults were being told, you know, that this is a disability. I thought it's not a disability. I've been joining in this program called No Wrong Path for many years, which means that when young adults do their exams, for those who might not have got the exam results they wanted, you know, some people out there say, well, I've done this and I've done that and I've done the other and I didn't pass my exams, so it's not the end of the world. And for me, it was not only a revelation where everything suddenly slotted into place, but it gave me the power and the evidence to be able to say to young adults, this is not a disability. You may very well have super prominent qualities, and that's what we need to look at.
100%, absolutely. No, fascinating that it's, and I think that's the point. Going back, you said that sort of tick box thing of examinations, in the sense of you're either, it's very binary, isn't it? That thing of, and it doesn't take into account all those other qualities that you just mentioned, and it just essentially just dismisses them in that one instance of getting that piece of paper of as you say, because you can either carry on or not. You know, that's your education in the eyes of the state or whatever it is. It seems it's you're done type thing, and you just have to just go to something else. But it just shows that you can, for your own story of what you've done, there's so many other things, other paths you can take, and it's amazing that you're now then doing that for other people.
That's just something that I've always done, and I think there's a certain, one of my profiles is what I call Essence, which is a core driving forces analysis, and that identifies what truly drives you, what your values and motivations are. And it's quite an astonishing analysis. And in that analysis, I have a very high aesthetic core driver. Now, aesthetic is not only being in awe and wonder of things, but it's also the people that have a high aesthetic driver are the ones that take lessons from the adversity they've been through and try and pass it on to others. And that's massively high for me. It's kind of way over the top end of the scale. So I was always going to be that person.
100%. And I think now it'd be, and I'm sure you've spoken about this in many instances. I know as part of your speaking profession, your keynote, in a sense of, you said there that the experience you went through that sort of elevated your fairness, essentially, of the 2004 tsunami and what happened there. You don't obviously, I know you've got huge speeches on it, but I'd love to know a little bit more from myself and the listeners out there, just some of obviously that experience that you went through, and then how that, I suppose, then changed the course of what you do now.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a long time for me to be able to incorporate it, and it was into my talking. And the only reason that I incorporated it into my talking is because I believe that the story is the wrapping paper, and the gift are the lessons that you bring. So in order to put it into context, the gifts are all the lessons that I learned in the aftermath of the tsunami. And I tell a little bit about the story just so that can, you know, wrap the gift and I can present it, you know. So I don't talk about the tsunami necessarily. I talk about what I learned in the aftermath. So I was in Hikkaduwa. I was caught smack bang in the middle of the Boxing Day tsunami. It was the second worst hit place on the planet after Indonesia. Sri Lanka was the second worst place hit, and particularly Hikkaduwa, the south. Never eat shredded wheat, southwest coast of Sri Lanka, very, very badly hit. But it was what I learned in the aftermath, and it was being able to see what I call the magnificence of humanity, watching people come together and seeing what it takes for human beings to come together. And there's a whole host. I mean, I was only there for a week, but that week of my life gave me more lessons than all of the years previous. You know, it just jam-packed full of these beautiful lessons that were just boom, just bestowed upon me. And watching human beings in the face of adversity is the most beautiful thing. In some ways it's horrific, and in other ways it's beautiful, because you realize that most of us don't even know how much we've got to give until our metal is tested, until we're up against it. And then all of a sudden we get this kind of, second wind, third wind, superpowers just come out of nowhere. And that is beautiful to see. And I think one of the most important things was the fact that nobody judged anyone else. Whatever you brought to the party was valued. And that changed my whole, I guess, my whole understanding about, how valuable people are. It didn't matter, what your job title was back in old Blighty or wherever it was you came from. It didn't matter what car you drove, how much you earned or whatever. It was actually what you bought in that situation that was suddenly important. So all of a sudden, somebody that had learnt to fish with his granddad, or learnt to knit with their grandmother, or learnt how to dress a wound in the Girl Guides, or build a fire in the Scouts, I don't know, all those things suddenly became really important. And it kind of leveled the playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, thank you so much for sharing. I think that sort of lesson in itself, because it kind of then relates to a little bit of what we were talking about, the sort of the education thing, and the whole thing of what people value, or what they bring as they value themselves. So sometimes we talk about the sort of our values in a sense of the words that we maybe use to describe ourselves, but there's also that what we bring as a value, as a skill, as a, whether it be a practical skill or a thoughts type skill. And I don't know if you've experienced this with what you do in work, but I've seen it with the show, and then people I've worked with, is how quickly people can dismiss those things that they have about themselves, because it's just so either natural to them, or it's the way they've been. They don't think themselves are bringing that value. So is that something that you now, from that experience in Sri Lanka, bring to the people you work with, to try and get them to evoke their own valueness as such?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. I think the key thing for me is that most people don't value what they bring, because like you said, it's second nature to them. It's just natural. They just do it. But it's not until you realize that other people that don't have that gift, or don't have that value to bring, they value it incredibly. So, this is why I'm saying, you might think, oh, I'm just a plumber. Can you imagine how valuable it was when you've got more than 100 people in one garden with just a latrine, no working toilet? Can you imagine how valuable it is for a plumber to bring their skills to that environment? Because you're potentially saving lives, stopping people from getting disease and illness and all those kind of things. It's massively valuable. So actually, it's only when people can't do something that you do naturally that you start to realize how valuable that is to them. It's always the people that can't do it. And I'm not just talking about life skills here. I'm talking even when people are deciding where their market is, when they're starting out in their own business, or, or looking at their marketing plans, and they're trying to find people like them. And it's like, no, you need to find people that can't do what you do, because they find you more valuable. They're going to pay more. They're going to be they're going to be wanting your services most. That's where you're most valuable. It's where people can't do what you bring.
That's really interesting. Because there's probably that element, because I know you've obviously that area of what you've got. Obviously, when I was looking at your profile and when we met previously, the sort of the array of different things that you've done, and obviously marketing being one of them. There's an element, I think, with myself as the starting out, there's always that sort of bit of holding you back. So you kind of stay in where you know. So you think versus, as you say, going for where it's that the gap in the market is the person that doesn't have what you have. And it's that whole thing of stepping out that comfort zone thing, to reaching out, thinking they actually will find you valuable, but that blocker thinking, oh no, I'll just stay within my close circle, seems a bit safer, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it might look like I've had an eclectic background, but actually the golden thread through everything is simply communication. Communication is what I'm good at.
Nice.
Now, when I first started in my own business, I started a marketing company because I knew how to communicate with people. I knew how to sell, and I wanted to be able to do that for other people. But I also was very maverick, and I wanted to challenge the industry. And for me, marketing back then, back in the olden days, it was all smoke and mirrors. It was it's going to cost you this much per month, and we can't tell you what results we're going to get. And I was like, no, marketing should be like anything else. It should be like, going to the shop and buying a loaf of bread. You look through the window, you see the loaf of bread you want, you go in, you pay your price, and you walk out with a loaf of bread. Why can't marketing be like that? So that's why I started in marketing. But very quickly, I then realized that the communication, the sales skills and all that kind of stuff was only the start of it. I then went on to specialize in non-visual communication because all the work we did was over the phone. So I wrote a book called Phone Genius, The Art of Non-Visual Communication. Then after that, I developed into non-verbal communication. So all of the eye contacts, body language, advanced body language, everything, and then into behavior profiling. So it's like a perfect triangle now. And it's all about being able to communicate and read other people.
Fantastic. And I'm really interested in the sense of the profiling side of stuff, not just the one that you've done it, but the fact that you essentially created your own version of it. Where did the genesis of even coming up with wanting to do your own on that?
It's not a selfish thing. A lot of people, I think a lot of people don't understand. When you are ADHD, one of the things that you can do is hyperfocus. So you can learn things really quickly. So if you hyperfocus, it means you're literally working around the clock. You forget to eat, sleep, drink, anything. And you just hyperfocus. You get into this massive creative flow where all of a sudden you're working 10 to the dozen. So I hyperfocused on learning about behavior profiling. But the problem was the fact that every profile I used, I could see the mistakes. So if I do an insights profile, I know there's a particular question there that's going to evoke the wrong answer, that's going to lead people down the wrong garden path and give me the wrong profile. So an insights profile will catch my yellow behavior, but it's not going to catch my red behavior because the question's wrong. And, another Wiley disc leaves a lot to be desired in so many ways. And every single profile I used, I started to see the mistakes. And I realized that a lot of people that had created a behavior profile, what they'd actually done is they'd just taken someone else's, they'd reverse engineered it, put their own label on it and gone, there you go, I've got my own profile. And what they didn't realize is they're copying the mistakes. So you can see the mistakes. And it's almost, that's something that somebody who's AUD might pick up better than me. But I saw it. It was just screaming out at me. So I thought, do you know what? We can do better than this. And I went back to William Moulton Marsden's original work, the creator of DISC, and I tried to understand what he really meant. And so I wrote it from scratch and then kind of created, my own profile, which is called Clarity. And I know it might sound cocky, but if I found a profile that was good enough, I wouldn't have needed to do my own. I didn't. Yeah. That's why I did my own. So if you want to know which behavior profile's best, it's mine.
I love it. I love it. But I love it. But I love that it in the Michelle, in the sense that it was through trying to understand yourself. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't, as you say, it wasn't like I'm going to then go build, or it's like I've seen a gap in the market again, or I'm going to be. It was the fact that you were trying to understand from the selfish perspective was like, I'm trying to understand me better, so I can then progress. But then the realization was like, well, actually, the contradiction in the answers was like, well, actually, it's not. So what's the difference? Because I've done, say, insights, Myers-Briggs and stuff like that throughout the years of my professional or personal, all the rest of it. So is there a sort of like, because they have all the indicator types and stuff, their outcomes, what's the difference in a sense of your results, should I put it, or I don't know how you phrase it, compared to the rest? What's the sort of profile that you give to people?
So first of all, it's really important to doff my cap in the right direction. This is DISC. It's a DISC profile.
Okay.
Now, not all DISC profiles are the same. There are lots
Yep.
of different DISC profiles, and people might ask why that is. And that's because William Alton Marsden, who created it, wanted it to be open source. He wanted people to be able to access it. He wasn't one of these people that went, no, mine, I want to earn as much money as I can. That's not who he was. So he wanted it to be open source. So if you want to create a profile, a behavior profile, the models that you can lean towards, you couldn't go and do your own insights, because that belongs to Insights, and all the Andy Lovian that created it. That's who it belongs to. But DISC is different. Anyone can pick up the theory of DISC and create their own analysis from it. The difference with mine is the fact that, first of all, I appreciate the difference between your behavior internally, who you really are, when you're at ease at home, and without any pressure, and then the behavior profile that you put on for other people. And that's not it's not disingenuous in any way. It's just like saying you don't swear as much when your nan's in the car. We do act differently in front of other people. So this measures the two, and it shows the work you, and then the real you, and that can look at the different prominent qualities. We then look at 12 prominent qualities inside of that and show you where you really shine. And I think mine is the only profile that I know of that is perfectly balanced, so that this is the fairness thing coming out here, James. This is every single prominent quality you have. You're going to have something you're really crap at, and and it's perfectly balanced, so everyone gets their chance to shine. And I don't know another profile that is that perfectly balanced. So the fairness really comes out in that. It is saying that there is no right or wrong in behavior. Everyone gets their chance to shine, and there's 27 or 28 pages, depending on the pagination of the writing, of information about your profile. It is massive.
Yes, no, it's because I think it's, and as much as I've done them, as I say before, in previous positions I've held, and I've always found when I've done them, this is just my own personal experience, and this is probably it's definitely reflective of myself, is like, I still found them that like they were a test. That I was, do you know what I mean? Like, whether it be Myers, Insights, whatever, whenever I've done any of them, there's an element of judgment coming out of the report or whatever you get from it. And it to me, in a sense of, whenever I've done any of those, my one is like, definitely a sort of fairness is one, but the sort of compassionate sort of qualities and things like that, empathy, there's not enough room on the charts for me. I'm just way above it. So I'm always, my perspective is also thinking of, how is this going to make someone feel? That's where I'm coming from. So I'm immediately probably a little bit on a defensive, because I'm thinking, how is this going to make me feel? But there's an element to me of those ones that I've done, to me is a coldness to them. It's quite sort of just very, this is matter of fact almost,
I just love the way that your mind is working, because that's exactly one of my issues with behavior profiles. I wanted everyone to feel empowered when they've done their profile. So it doesn't matter. I have, like, I'll give you an example. My blue in my behavior, which is the C in DISC, and it's very, very low. But instead of saying you're really low, what it says is, it goes to the opposite and says how maverick I am and how creative I am. So it's actually looking at the positives that low score brings in the opposite. So there is nobody that's going to come out feeling flat. Everyone is going to feel empowered when they read the results. And it's not, it's not biased. It's not pretending everything's unicorns and fairies, but it's actually appreciating the opposite prominent qualities that are shown. So, you know, if you're massively self-confident, that's great. It means your accuracy is going to be through the floor, because you can't be both. And it's about understanding that you can't be everything to everyone, and you shine where you shine, and where you're really bad at something, give it to someone else. And one of my problems with previous profiles is the fact that these behaviour profiles, they tell you, you know, Michelle, you're really bad at maths. You ought to practice maths. No, I don't want to practice maths. I have dyscalculia. Why would I want to practice something I'm really bad at? I just want to leave it to someone else and say, do you know what? I need a calculator, or I need an accountant to do all that stuff. Just let me be massively creative and all the things I'm really good at, and leave that stuff that I'm not good at behind.
100%. No, because it's everything is like, because it's screaming at me, because they're like, when we were talking, I was mentioning earlier about those various different documentaries on neurodiversity and things at the moment, and my wife and I have this discussion, in a sense, at the moment, of like, maybe in different ways we have something or another ourselves. Like, and one of mine was, it's like there's an element maybe of dyslexia in there, and I don't know, because in a sense of like, I can spell and stuff, but there's certain times it's just where I find it a challenge is I can talk very well to people. I can put me in it, and I can say whatever. I can come up. I have the vocabulary, and I can remember things, and I can put it into words. You ask me to write it, and I will say the same sentence about 5 times. I just find it really hard to type out copy or words in a way that doesn't sound like I'm repeating myself. But if you just ask me to speak about it, my brain will go into a different way, where I can remember facts and figures and things and scripts and stuff. I can remember stuff and put it into a way and talk it. You ask me to write it, and you'll get the same paragraph written slightly differently 5 times. And but if I do it as a profile, they say you need to work on your writing skills. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but I literally, I would just be there, and I'll be the fingers will be over the keyboard and be like, nah, it's not gonna happen. But if you put me in front of a microphone, or if you put me like to have a conversation with, we've met once before, happy out. So, but I love the fact that what you mentioned, go back to the point you said, is the profile. It would highlight the positive aspect of where something else is deemed as a lower thing. So and you say it's not spin. It's not to try and sugarcoat it. It's to say, look, this is what this means in an empowering, as the word you used there, way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this thing about neurodivergence, I'm going to go back to neurodivergence.
Yeah.
I think if we look in the future, not too far in the distant future, I think we're going to have a delabeling of all this stuff, because what you've said is absolutely right. And if you've been for an assessment, you know, if you've gone to the professionals for an assessment, what they do is they ask about all your neurodivergent potential traits and things like that, and they just score them. And if you get a certain score, they say, yeah, you're neurodivergent. And if you get under that score, no, you're not neurodivergent. It's a ridiculous, simplistic way of testing, because, and I'm not saying that everyone's on the autistic spectrum. No. That's something that is really triggering for a lot of people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is neurodivergence is the wrong word. There's nothing divergent about it. And I can tell you, as a behaviour profiler that does thousands and thousands of behaviour profiles and sees the analyses, if you listen to the experts, they'll say 25% of our society is neurodivergent. I'm telling you, it's more like 70%, 75%, according to the results I've had. Does that mean that I only get involved in neurodivergent organisations? Is that because, you know, I don't know, they're attracted to me, I'm attracted to them? No, it's because that's the evidence that I'm seeing. So I think it's only a matter of time before we drop that neurodivergent and just say, do you know what? We're just people. Very complicated, very beautiful, very gorgeous people.
Yeah, absolutely. And to echo the point there that you said for your profile is to very much highlight and empower the people's positive value that they bring, to really, because it goes back to the story of talking about in Sri Lanka, in a sense of, well, what can people do to, even in that short space of time, in that week, of to keep that group of people going, to keep that. So, and it's that's if you bring that out to the wider society, is that are we all able to help and enable each other through the positive aspects we can bring, versus focusing on, as you say, even like when I'm thinking of these profile things, it's like, I don't like the fact that it's a graph. And you say, it's like, well, here's the midline. You're either above or below. And even that, I find it's kind of like, because it immediately gives that sort of pass fail.
Yeah.
This is right. This is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's that, or if it's a circle, you're closer or further away. It's this, when you're sort of, if you've got that sort of thinking of historical, or I wasn't intelligent, or I wasn't this, or I wasn't that, as soon as you see a marker, and if you're below it, you immediately will think, oh, Jesus, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. And I think the fact that my scatter graph shows, everything up to 100% on the top corner and everything down to 0% on the other, it shows you the opposite traits.
Yeah.
So that if there's something low, if you've got a low score in something, that there's an opposite. There's going to be sky high. So rather than concentrating on what's low, you go, okay, so that's something I don't get out of the bag very often. That's something I don't do a lot. What am I doing? What am I bringing to the party? And it shows you right there what the opposite quality is. And you can just celebrate that and, and embrace it and say, yeah, this is what I bring.
Yeah, 100%. I'm interested in the sense of, one, obviously, that what you do and the work you do, but I'm also interested in a sense of your history. And whenever I talk to people who are into business themselves, was it that sort of setting up a business? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or is it you just decided, I'm just going to do, when you started the marketing or just being in business? What was the sort of idea of actually getting into business for yourself?
Do you know what? I have to thank my ex-husband to a certain extent. I was married for a very short period of time. I was in the Air Force. I was only married 10 months, I think. But the lessons that I learned were massive. One of the lessons was, I remember saying to him, he was a mechanic, and I remember saying, oh, when we leave the Air Force, we can start our own garage. You can be the mechanic and I'll do all the business. And he laughed out loud and said, who do you think you are? What do you know about running a business? And I thought, what do I need to know about running a business? And sometimes it's those spiky triggering things that are your driving force. And I remember when I decided that I was head of client development for a branding agency down in London, I wanted to come back home to the Midlands and be nearer my family. And I remember thinking, well, I'll just do it myself. I'm doing a brilliant job. What if I did this for loads of other people? I'll just do it myself. Yeah. And so that's how it started. But all the while, I've got this voice in the back of my head going, who do you think you are? What makes you think you can do that? And that actually drove me to say, I'll show you who I am. Yeah. And I love that, because those negative elements in my life have quite often been, when someone says you can't do it, quite often they've been the trigger going, oh, right, okay, I'll show you. So, I'm grateful for all of those lessons, for all the negativity that's driven me forward. Looking back, I didn't really fit into the Air Force. I didn't really fit into the corporate world. I didn't really fit anywhere. So it's kind of that maverick element of me made me a very young CEO. I was CEO of a company with 14 people in it when I was 32 years old. So just did it.
Yeah, love it.
I didn't just do it though, James. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't just do it. I did it bloody well. I won every single award going. Youngest company in the country to gain investors in People, or one of them anyway. Shining example of how you can do it.
Yeah. And would you, because I've spoken to plenty of people on the show, people listening who've got into it, or like myself, wanting to get into business. Is it almost, what would you think of is the sort of, to be able to start or create a successful business? Is there any sort of secret in that horrible word, or is it just a case of, you know what, you just got to keep working the opposite of, is it strategy? Is it planning? Is it grinding? Is there anything that you think that's out there that's real that you can do?
It's playing to your strengths. And I love the synergy of the way that this conversation's going, because it brings us back full circle. What did I do when I wanted to start a business? I looked at where the problem was and I thought, why are we doing it like that? Now, that is natural to me because of my behavior profile. I'm the kind of person that says, why are you doing it that way? That's why I created my own behavior profiles. I was like, why is everyone following this profile, which is giving not necessarily the most accurate results? Why is everyone following it like sheep? I'll just do my own. Am I going to be more successful than somebody that's got millions of pounds to throw into their marketing? Probably not, but I'll be more satisfied. So for me, that whole element about marketing and what's wrong with marketing, that's what drove me to say, why doesn't someone do it different? Can you imagine what would happen if somebody did it different? So for me, my marketing agency, I was paid on results only. I was like, you come in, you buy your loaf of bread and you give me the money. If you don't get a loaf of bread, you don't give me any money. Simple. And nobody had done it before, which is, what made it so unusual and win all those awards is because no one else was doing it. You look at Purple Bricks it's not a best example, but it's the way that somebody looked at the market and said, what is wrong with estate agents? What is wrong with banking? And then Egg came up many, many years ago and all these kind of things. It's like, what is the issue? And how can I make that different? So for me, that makes it really easy. If you are different, then, you can sing and shout and scream about it right from the word go. And, you've got every authority to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I think to bring it through into the conversation, again, it's getting people to, if they wanted to get into that space of business, it's like that almost, we were talking about it, that value that they see in themselves as just the norm, that could be the difference in a sense of the way that they see something. They see it a certain way. Sometimes it's their assumption that everyone sees it that way. And it's like, very much, can't be the case. So it's the fact that you need to express it and get out there. And I suppose the other point that you mentioned earlier as well, I think it comes into this as well, is if you can't do something, it's reaching out and asking the people that can do it or can do it better than you to help you. I think that holds a lot of people back as well, the reaching out piece.
Yeah, I think it does. And one of the things, I'm going back to my profile again, but one of the things that Clarity does is it shows you how other people perceive you.
Okay.
And I think that's really important, James, because I know that people who are like me will see me as captivating. They'll see me as trailblazing. But people who are the opposite behavior to me are likely to see me as being a show off, being too loud, being too aggressive. Those are the things they will see. And whether that is true or not, it is their perception. It's true to them. So therefore, if I'm dealing with someone that is the opposite of me, I'm the one with the power. I'm the one with the information. So I'm the one that has to reach them. So, if I'm speaking on stage and I know people are going to think, oh, she's really good, but she's a bit scary. If I'm speaking to an audience full of people that are likely to be like that, I will come across in a different way. I'm meeting them in the middle. I'm taking the barriers down. I'm not changing who I am. I'm just taking those barriers away so that what I deliver lands and is taken by my audience, and it's the same whether you're marketing, whether you're selling, it's exactly the same. Whether you're speaking, your audience, your target audience, you have to communicate with them in a way that's going to make it easy for them to say, I get it, I'm going to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, many times. I don't know if you know of or know Jerry Duffy. Yes, so known him for a few years and that. And I remember of any of the talks I went to with him, he's like, when he'd be working with teams or anything, he was like, the audience is the most important. There's like, it's not, you're not up there if you're up there just for yourself, they're not going to get the message. It's you say the audience is the dictator in the sense of how you share your message, It's what they are going to receive versus what necessarily you just want to be able to say.
Do you know, I was membership director in the Professional Speaking Association for 4 years before I became national president. And some people think it's harsh when they've joined PSA or when they're thinking about joining PSA, I'm trying to help them get a foot of the ladder, trying to help them get some connections. If I ask them, why do you want to be a speaker? I think the worst answer is when people say, "Oh, I feel alive on stage. I'm meant to be on stage. I'm brilliant. I love it." It's I. If you don't understand what you are in service for, then the whole industry is probably not going to accept you the way that you think you're going to be accepted, because you come across in a completely different way. I prefer people who say, actually, I'm a bit reluctant to get up there and speak, but I've got a really important message. They are far more likely to be successful because they are already in service. They're understanding that actually they're just the conduit.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that brings us nicely into the sense of like, how did you then sort of first get into what you do now? Because you say you're the PSA president. How did you first get into sort of public speaking or keynote speaking?
So when I owned this marketing company, it was the Chambers of Commerce where I was winning awards. The Chambers of Commerce were saying, "Oh, Michelle, can you come and talk to this group of people?" So at first I was doing it for free. And then there was this, but of course it was great for my ego, and they go, "Oh, Michelle, you've been so successful. You come and show the other businesses how you did it." And so I started talking about marketing and communication. And then there was a department, like a spin-off of the Chamber of Commerce, which was called Business Link, I think. And Business Link started to pay me to go and speak to audiences. So even before I was in the tsunami, I was a paid speaker. It wasn't a large part of my business, but it was certainly something that I was doing. So from 2002, I was, paid to speak. And it was how I joined the PSA. I've been to a couple of regional PSA meetings in my past, and I hadn't really been that impressed. I didn't realise that actually, the national organisation is actually a different animal to the regional events. I didn't quite get that, and I found myself in a mastermind meeting, a very small mastermind meeting, but I was the only person in that whole meeting that wasn't in the PSA. So I actually joined the PSA to show willing, But it was when I went to my first national conference. I remember the social media post that I put out afterwards. I went, "Oh my God, I have found my tribe. Now I get it." I saw people from all over the world, from different associations, coming and giving their heart and soul from the stage for free. And I'm just like, wow, boom, I get this. And it just blew me away. And since that day, I've been 100% dedicated to the Professional Speaking Association. And I've been in the PSA now for 10 years and a few days. And half of that time I've spent on the board in service without pay. That's how much I love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and as I say, that's where we first met in the last one here, and you came over to Dublin. And that was my first time attending one of the events myself there, and and that was just in, say, the regional one in Dublin, an amazing room to be in, very inspiring people, and again, it's sometimes I find myself not sort of like, I don't know if pleasantly surprised is the right word, but it's that thing again of when you go into a room. Almost, I knew a few people because they'd been on the show, they'd been on the podcast, but that thing of like, what's this room going to be like? There's always that little bit of, you think it's going to be the nervous of trepidation of what are going in. But again, it's that, the only way I can describe it is, like you said before, when you were in that sort of, going back to Sri Lanka, that sort of equilibrium of the equalness of people. Everyone was there to either share, but to listen, not there to show who they were, not to be who, you know what I mean? No ego, I think, is basically the thing. Is like, no, we're all here to either share something in service or to learn from someone else. And that was a really sort of, probably barring all the sort of speaking that I heard from people that day, was that sort of level of, we're all here to just help each other with whichever way was up. And that's rare to me.
That's why I call it a tribe, and a lot of people in the PSA do. It's that feeling that everyone's here together. Now, you are going to go to some meetings that aren't brilliant. You're going to go to other meetings that are fantastic. You are going to go to meetings and come across people who are full of ego, and all they want is to hear the sound of their own voice. There are going to be people like that in there. But actually, it was many years ago when I actually got the President's Award from Lee Jackson, very dear friend of mine, many years ago now, because I did a behaviour profile. He said to me, he was a national president at the time, and he said, Michelle, why is it when people in the PSA say they want something and I put it on, they don't turn up? And I said, well, it's probably because it's not their subconscious what they really want. And he said, well, how do you find that out? So I actually did a profile of a section of the PSA. And whereas the board then thought that people were in the PSA because they wanted to get more money for speaking and grow their business, actually what we found was that core driving force was all about the community, what they could give back to society, and how they could fit into their tribe. It was that element that came right up here, and the finances were way below the bottom line. So actually we were able to see with proof that the PSA is this tribe of people that are there for each other. And I will tell you this, a lot of people will tell you this, the PSA is so much of my life now because I either bring my best friends to the PSA or people in the PSA become my best friends. And that's what I witnessed when I came to Dublin. You know, that meeting was so beautiful, such lovely people, such warm welcome, everyone trying to collaborate and help each other. It was beautiful, a lovely meeting.
Absolutely, no, 100%. No, it was it, and you say it, and here we are in a sense of from that. And I think it's those things of being in those rooms is wonderful. And I'd say it won't be my last meeting there for sure. Absolutely. Michelle, we could keep going on and on and on, and I wish we could, but there's a few questions I love to ask people whenever they come on the show, and one of them is I'm a big lover of quotes or phrases. I think they can be really powerful and impactful. Are there any quotes or phrases that are important to you? Do we need another hour?
No, forgive me. This is a funny one. Forgive me, and I'm sorry about this, Dad.
All right.
But I've got to quote my dad. And the reason I do is because it's become a kind of family saying.
Yeah.
You know, my dad, he always used to say, well, what goes up must come down. It doesn't matter what the problem is. You know, you say, if you ask my dad, if he's stuck for what to say, he'll just say, what goes up must come down. And he says it in this lovely Burmese accent.
Yeah.
And so it's because I think there's something very special about that. It's almost like saying, do you know what? In the scheme of things, it doesn't really matter.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how big the problem is.
Yeah.
In the scheme of things, how important is it? You know, and it's just one of those things that.
Love it.
It's a bit of a funny one, but I'll treasure it forever. If anyone says what's my favourite quote, I'll quote my dad.
Love it, because it's almost though it's like there's almost like a grounding to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like so silly, but it actually makes sense. But it's so funny you say that though, because like my dad he passed away coming up 4 years ago now. And when just short long after he passed away, when I was back over seeing all my siblings and the rest of it, and we were chatting there the nights after and stuff, and I had this thing in my head, and I was like, from when we were growing up as kids, and I was like, does anyone remember he used to just say, never waste a journey? And then everyone was like, yeah, saying it, but it's taken sort of different meaning now in some ways. But what he meant was, the story was like, if say I'm one of 5 siblings, so when we were growing up, so it's like, so if you were going out the room, he'd give you something to take out, or he'd ask you to bring something back, because he'd be like, "I'll make me a cup of tea when you're out there. I'll take this out there," and you'd be going, "Oh, Daddy, God, never waste a journey." So it was a very literal thing of like, but it's funny now because it's like if I'm planning the rest of my day, I'd be like, well, I'll do that, then I'll go there. I'm always thinking of like, don't do just thing at once. You know what I mean? It's like, so I have this thing in my head, and I can take this further meaning from it of, you know, don't waste the whole, you know, journey of life. But it's very literally, it was a way of us getting doomed to do more stuff.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you use that one from your dad, because it's one that sort of like, when I think of it, it'll make me laugh. like the one who was making you laugh. You know what I mean? In the sense of, because it's just so personal that it can literally snap you out of whatever it is you were thinking, or something was too big or too small or whatever it is. Love it. No, brilliant. Anyone do you think has been really influential in your life?
Well, I'm going to say William Moulton Marsden. So it's such a fascinating character, so ahead of his time. So back in 1927, he wrote the book Emotions of Normal People. He and his wife were Harvard University lecturers. Elizabeth was so ahead of her time. University lecturers. He was a lawyer. He was a philanthropist. He was a feminist. He was so many things. Such a polymath in many ways. But just his love for human beings and their emotions, and where he came from in terms of creating everything he did, creating the first or being part of the team that created the first rudimentary ever a polygraph, which was actually, if you think about it, it's measuring your emotions, your physical reaction to things. It's your emotions, which is why people call it a lie detector now. And they say that it shows the truth. Actually, if you put a psychopath or even a sociopath through a polygraph, they're going to pass with flying colours, because they don't have the emotional connection to measure. And he just did so much wonderful work. And I just think that the legacy that he left, I like to think that I've picked up the baton. I don't use the same model as every other behaviour profiler out there. They're like, you have to pay per profile. It doesn't matter how many profiles you have to pay per profile. I don't do that. I put my system into organisations and I say, there you go, I'll show you how to use it. Just pay me a licence fee, do as much as you want. So I'm trying to carry on his legacy and give it to as many people as possible for a fair way of doing it, rather than about making profit. It's not all about the finances for me. So, I don't know him. He died way before I was born. But from everything that I know about him, he's the one person that I try and emulate.
I love that. I love the fact that, as you say, that someone from so long ago can still, and you say the continuation of what he was trying to do, and the next iteration of essentially of what the work he was trying to promote was fabulous. Michelle, as I say, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you, and I'm sure we could do the same again and again. But obviously, at some point we have to finish. Before I do finish up, I want to ask the final question: is what's important for your future?
What's important in my future? I would love to see humanity collaborating. For me, collaboration is so important. And this is another thing I learned in the aftermath of the tsunami, how people can collaborate effectively. We can create something greater than the sum of our parts when we collaborate. And I want to see, areas of society breaking down and not collaborating all the time. And I think we need to come together. So when we see things that are poking holes in our beliefs and all the rest of it, we need to come together, collaborate and work against it. That's the way that we're going to succeed. So I want to see collaboration.
Love it. Absolutely. As I said, Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you so much for joining me here. We're going to make sure that anyone who wants to be able to follow you and connect with you online, all the links will be in the show notes. But if you would like to give a shout out now where people can follow and connect online with yourself.
Well, LinkedIn's the best place. I'm the only Michelle Mills Porter on the planet. Thank God, my husband says quite often. But there's only one of me. So just link in with me. If you just put a message in terms of, saw you on the show or something like that, then I'll know immediately to accept you. And I love creating those relationships. The one thing that I will say is, I have massive rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So if people don't connect with me, or they say they're going to and they don't, I get very sad. So just reach out. I love meeting people. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Love it. Thank you again, Michelle. Thank you so much for chatting to me today.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for holding such a wonderful space.
Love it. Thanks for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if it resonated, share it with someone who might need it too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or ask a question, and let's keep the conversation going. I'm James Dean, and I'll be back soon with another real conversation to help you reconnect with what truly matters. Until then, take care and stay curious.